Chapter 31. The Meat-Snatching Beasties. Under the trees of the short bushes and Artemisia pike shaking, I stood at the entrance to the hole, ready to lower the wooden door, hide in. This situation, very much like a group of crocodiles in a large quagmire pouncing on the momentum, but the forest trees coiled under the old roots of the horizontal wood can move forward at such a speed, must not be reptilian ferocious things. Dilated pupils, staring intently at the impending danger, couldn't guess what it could be that had suddenly surged past my earlier peak. Swish, 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 swish. Several leopard cats with fancy fur jumped out of the woods and stopped at the edge of the bush, shaking their heads from side to side, inspecting the surrounding movements. Immediately afterward, the leopard cats that ran behind them scurried to a stop in front of them, crouched down, and sniffed the air around their noses like rabbits, recognizing something. Densely packed leopard cats, squatting and huddling in the short bushes at the edge of the forest. As if in the Cold War era, the opposing side was standing by, ready to attack. I realized that the leopard cat that had been harassing us didn't just want to get some food away from here. It was like a scout, lurking around the cave for 2 days, occasionally showing up to test our aggressiveness. Go back and call a large group of your kind and launch a lightning-fast cajoling operation. Such a cunning beast, I actually want to use a simple cage to catch it. Humans are sometimes too naive and confident. This group of sinister leopard cats patrolled for a moment, saw me hiding in the cave entrance, thinking that the powerful cat team scared us. Countless cats' eyes flashed brightly, and boom, the whole group jumped up and scurried towards the sun-dried meat. That running and jumping posture, very similar to toads migrating across the road, paying no attention to pedestrians and vehicles. This really scared me. If I did not stop immediately, the hard-earned food will be snatched up in no time. Shooting randomly with a dense forest gun is useless. Consuming all the bullets will only kill 40 or 50. The killing effect is 90%. In the heat of the moment, I cannot think of any good countermeasures. Pick up a long, thick stick, swinging in the air, waving, loudly shouting at the cats. Dashed, densely packed leopard cats scurrying and biting at the circle on the rattan animal meat. See me over. They still have no fear, just tearing and swallowing, like hungry for several lifetimes. Aimed at the leopard cat crowded dense piece, with the anger of being robbed. Make enough hard to smash down. Large groups of leopard cats, such as millions of ants rolling and biting rice balls, black piles together, just open their mouths, tugging and pulling the ready-made food. Agile body for a moment to avoid, by the wooden stick solidly smashed up. A burst of ear-piercing screams. 5 or 6 were hit hard by the wooden stick on the spot side. Crooked body, lying on the gravel. The spine must be broken badly. The internal organs are also seriously ruptured. The pain stirrups the legs and body straight shivering. Eyeballs cannot stop. Upward rolled, the mouth of the animal meat, gurgling and spitting out the white foam, as if a baby held out the sticky milk. The rest of the scared wailed, "Miso, miso," scattered. I stood in the middle of the drying meat, gesturing the stick, signaling the group of guys do not come any closer, or thunder the same as the fate of those dead cats. Beast meat drying, spread out a large area. A large group of leopard cats still take a lot of dried meat, put in fear, in the far place from me to swallow and chew, and from time to time slanting eyeballs glancing, both for fear of being smashed by the stick, but also want to come over to take a few more pieces. I was really eating from the bowl and looking at the pot. My greed was greater than my fear. I was heartbroken by the jerky. The leopard cats were huge in number, and if each of them took a piece, we would lose 100 or so pounds of food. A few leopard cats that had finished eating the jerky in their mouths were still not dead, and tried to approach the sun-dried meat that was farther away from me. If I went over to hit it, the sun-dried meat at the other end would be eaten by other leopard cats. At this moment, picking up stones to smash, one would feel ridiculous. I think in this group of guys, there must be that leopard cat that scouted and reported, told the same kind about my clumsy attack of throwing stones, and then laughed together, thinking that I was so easy to bully. That stick went down, although it just smashed a few of them to death. But in the past 2 days, the depression of being pestered by a leopard cat was relieved quite a lot. This stick was a bit of a deterrent to them, out of the leopard cat's expectation, and made them raise their guard quite a bit. Large groups of leopard cats have seen agile, wooden stick-swinging whirring wind, a moment also. Dare not approach, and I circled up. A few large, more forward, impatient, and even roared at me. The cat's waist arched up high. The hair on the back of the spine was erect and exploded. The tail was curling, fluttering the hook, deliberately exposing the ferocious teeth to me to see. This kind of beast. Teeth are also very sharp, bone-white fine tooth tip, flashing with a cold light. If my body shrunk to a tenth of its original proportion, even if it was the size of a goat, these larger guys would tear me apart in an instant. These fat guys, usually, must be the leader of the leopard cat group. Now both want a cat. Brothers and sisters in front of the cat. Show a bit of prestige. Just see my huge size, powerful. Heart is also very false fear. Only pretentious hissing to me, playing a few squirrels catching flowery frame. If it really wants to save face and rush up to show off, I will immediately swing a stick to kill it, and its little capital of big waist among the same kind makes it easy for me to hit it. Behind a few fat leopard cat is a large body of small and medium-sized leopard cat. Inside the male and female, old and young, pulling the family all ran to. There may also be interspersed with beautiful female cats, or cubs that worship big fat cats, 4 or 500 cat eyes staring at the front few big cats in unison. This invisible motivation and pressure prompting these big cats in front of them, constantly approaching towards the tanned meat that I was guarding, and I could see that they were very wimpy from the higher and higher tails and stubbed spine hairs. This group of guys will only coax together to snatch food. There is no sense of unity and desperation, such as if that is the case, all pounced on me, will be able to instantly gnaw me into a bloody skeleton. I can't figure out in my heart, small leopard cats have a high degree of collaboration. In the consciousness, the impression of the cat's habit is to be alone. This desert island ecological environment in the growth of the leopard cat seems to be closer to the nature of the wild leopard. In my years of fighting in the jungle, I have seen herds of wild leopards who sometimes hunt large-sized yaks or crocodiles together out of hunger. A leopard cat that came closest to me, double ears young round, tail thick and long, embarrassed bright silver-gray eyes, through the infinite psychedelic, fur color light white strange, similar to the ink painting in the young leopard, only with a large black spot on the cheeks, as if just drilled out of the stove, sticky nose full of black ash. Genus this guy was barking at me ferociously and did have a few intimidating touches. It may think of me as a giant rat, and I think of it as a small wild leopard. But the destructive power of both sides of the attack was different, even if it was bigger in size and more powerful in its roar. If it pounced on me, at most it would scratch my flesh, and it would be far less terrifying than an authentic forest leopard. If I clutched its tail towards the rock of fall, immediately send it to the west, far more than before that giant bear, gripping my thigh, to the rock knocking violent much more. The group of cats saw this large leopard cat slowly approaching me, immediately agitated. I must curb this momentum. This group of small beasts also have the possibility of chicken blood boiling. Really, if a brain to pounce on me, the consequences are disastrous. Tackling thieves is a tactic used among humans, but not with small animals. I picked up a skewer of sunburnt meat, and the action of bending over scared the cats into immediate retreat. It was not a retreat for fear of being hit by me, but a kind of full bow ready to be shot aura. I guessed correctly that they did want to swarm and attack me. I threw the meat skewer in my hand forward 4 or 5 meters to give them an illusion that I want to compromise, take the initiative to feed. This group of leopard cats hula surrounded the bite, up to scramble. Strong leopard cats naturally grab ferocious, eat more, small, and medium-sized. Leopard cats did not eat a few mouthfuls, the few big cats even to the corner of their mouths to grab the meat, surging unity immediately by the conflict of the weak and the strong. At the right moment, I jumped over, holding the wooden stick with both hands and smashed it hard against the cats that were grabbing food. They only focus on internal conflict, did not expect me to come to such a hand. A moment cannot dodge, was I swung all over the place, wailing and screaming, crying parents in pain. The feeling of smashing cats is like hitting a thick quilt on the ground. The sound wasn't very enjoyable, but it was a relief. I shouted to Poe and Sarit, rushed out to collect the sun-dried meat, and grabbed a wooden stick on the ground, smashed and swept and poked at the cats, and opened fire left and right. At this moment cannot care about it cat sister cat. Sister, cat child cat milk, see a killed one. Running slow will be unlucky, immediately killed. This a hard hit. Swing dead enough to 100 or so leopard cat, large and small, flower white, gray and black, a cross-body creek head. Some were smashed in the skull. The pain curled up, arching. On the ground, mouth, eyes, nose and ears overflowing with blood. Those hit in the spine, still. Straight body shaking and struggling for life. Not long to live. Hit the tail or hind legs, I was strange. Scream, scurry jumped up high, stayed in the air, did not have time to fall, by my other hand of the wooden stick, horizontal flying, fell into the rock wall, brain splattered, blood sprayed like a spring. As if holding chopsticks to knock flies, the pleasure of steady and accurate came to life. Leopard cat group was finally dispersed, did not get beat up, ran into the woods to escape. Look back. The ground cat carcasses, Sarit and Poe, is still like the rain on the wheat field village girl. Vigorously to the cave to hold the meat. I told them, no need to grab the harvest and then take it out and grab it to dry. As long as it is dried before dark and hang it on the rock wall of the cave, it will not be easily snatched by this group of leopard cats in the future. Looking at the tanned meat on the ground, it was heartbreaking to give more than 200 pounds to the robbers. Just slaughtered back, the animal meat moisture is very large, nearly 2,000 pounds. This will be sun-dried meat, about 1,000 pounds or so. This is 1/5 less. It seems that a month of food is a little nervous. But look back, most of the leopard cats on the ground are fat and strong. The small ones are about 10 pounds, and the big ones are nearly 20 pounds. Fur is not rare. The meat slaughtered out of the sun-dried, there are also 300 to 400 pounds from the weight, rather than a loss, just is not how the taste. Chapter 32. Intimacy in the middle of the night. Poe was the most frightened. It was the first time she had seen so many leopard cats. Sarit and I had had many close encounters, and the panic was not so strong. I washed the cat's blood off my body in the stream and hurried to build the wooden wall. I was already building the wall too fast to be efficient, but after the looting by the leopard cats, I was a little more anxious. As darkness fell, the beast's meat was thoroughly sunned and all stocked into the caves. The length of the wooden wall reached 10 meters, and with a few more days of perseverance, the safe enclosed yard would be completely built. The giant bear's skin was well tanned, with a soft and smooth surface, and I used it to make a third queen-sized bed, which was both relaxing and comfortable to sleep on alone at night. The Lord really took care of us, and the day after the food was stocked up, it rained heavily on the island, but we didn't have to worry about anything. There was firewood and dried meat in the cave, and after we were warmed up, we all sat in the cave and talked. I can't take a break from rainy weather, go outside and build a wooden wall without having to put up with the sun. A lot of the animals will stop moving and basically stop coming out to forage for food, and I'm taking advantage of the opportunity to get more done. The rain is a hot air mass that evaporates from the ocean, drifts over the island, and falls down vertically. The reason why the streams are abundant and plentiful means that this island is very rainy. When cutting wood, due to the slippery trees, and then use the flying kick to break the tree, it is easy to stomp slippery fall. If in this great time to build, body injury, it is a big trouble. Head like kettle, constantly pouring down rain into the eyes, affecting the work of vision. I cut some long, thin strips of wood and weave them into a hat to cover my head and shield it from the raindrops that directly hit my eyes, and then I squinted my eyes and continued to build the wooden wall. Sarit and Po were always worried about me and couldn't stop looking out of the cave entrance to see if I was okay, working in the rain. When it was time to eat, Miyu would always roast the meat to make it crispy and comfort my tired body and mind. Not a single seabird was to be seen on the island, all hiding in their warm, dry nests. Most of those nests were on the steep, slippery walls of the high rocks, and judging from the number of leopard cats that day, I guess no birds would build their nests on the branches of trees. The rain continues to fall from morning to night. The afternoon cannot build a wooden wall for a long time. The line of sight will be dimmed down. Had to go back to the cave early. Po every sleep to the middle of the night, always quietly come over into my arms, leaving Sarit alone. Sleep the original bearskin. I think this is not good for Sarit. She is a 16-year-old girl, and my little fiancé cannot be cold to her on the two bearskin, but together they will sleep on my body, listening to the rain at night. The rain on the entire island of the Scouring is very strong, which also makes the cave food is not easy to spread the breath. Beasts are virtually impossible to find this place. My heart is also a lot of peace of mind. After 5 days of rain, the island streams are more plentiful and the sound of the waterfall at the entrance to the cave is much louder. The three women spend their days in the cave, barbecuing food and chatting together, in a much better mood than before, and Miyu, who is now walking like a healthy woman, often walks back and forth through the cave with her baby in her arms, humming traditional Japanese tunes, her soft, sweet voice full of feminine melody. Sarit didn't mind Po occupying my bosom every night as she slept. She was content to wrap her arms around my back. In the middle of the night, when Po was asleep, I would gently turn around and hug her. Sarit's body was becoming more and more impulsive towards sex. She often shivered with excitement when she was in my arms, and her breathing was more likely to become rapid than ever before. As soon as I hold Sarit in the middle of the night, she immediately seeks out my mouth and sends her sweet tongue for me to suck and nibble, or nibble and suck on me. Her soft body was always so excited after being touched by me that she rubbed her body hard against me. I enjoyed kneading her soft and bouncy breasts, but I stopped short of doing so for fear that the sound of her panting would be too loud and wake up the sleeping Miyu and Po. I waited until Sarit's unconscious excitement had returned a little before I dared to knead them again. Sarit's body was extraordinarily hot when she made out with me secretly these past few nights, especially between her lower belly and buttock cleavage, and as soon as I kneaded her, the source of her moist heat down there immediately emanated strongly. I use rough fingers, hook, grinding under her thin pants, the girl's private place. She will feverishly swallowed my tongue, nostrils out of the full of girl's breath of the warm flow. This warmth would stimulate my crotch to swell dramatically, the eel-like surge that supported my pants high under my belly, the top grinding into the top of Sarit's soft belly as my spinal nerves continued to surge with pleasure. Sarit's belly, after feeling my impulsive thrusts, and her hot little hands unconsciously probed down to caress the anxious hardness. I'm a man who has had many women and a rich sexual history, and it's hard for my crotch to collapse and ejaculate mucus without entering a woman's warm, moist parts. Maybe a woman like Miyu is more likely to make my excited nerves release their desire, but Sarit's pure body emanates the aura of a virgin, which also makes me unable to stop. Sarit, every excitement hard to get through the moment, the warm, soft, sweet mouth to my ear, vaguely said, "Want me? Want me?" Hot a jade's soft, small hand, eagerly in my abdomen pants waist, edge searching, tender fingertips into my pants and flesh between, accurately went down to grab. The crotch blood vessels erect hard thing, pinch and hold, small rounded thumb, massaging the glandular fluid that slipped out of my horse's eye due to stimulation. This action aroused me to the point of unbearable excitement, and without control, I used my thick palms to touch her backside, reach inside the panty belt, and grab and squeeze her upturned ass, which was already oozing with sweat. The middle finger went straight to the hot and vetgesh. The opening of a woman's private parts, much larger than a man's, contained moisture, like the abundant streams on the island these days, gurgling and overflowing into a slippery stream that gathered at the edge of the slit. The middle finger, before my nerves could instill the command, slipped uncontrollably into the hot and soft cleft. It was probably the first time a young girl had ever been explored so deeply by a man, and an ah came out of her throat, causing me to stop immediately. Sarit was stunned, then adapted to my finger, and frantically nibbled on me again. I was not allowed to make out with Sarit any further, even though she was my little fiancée. It would certainly be an adventure for a 16-year-old girl to really be on a deserted island like this, carrying a pregnancy and having a baby. When the rain stopped, it was already dusk after 5 days. The hard work during the day was not in vain. Looking at the high construction of the wooden wall, just as I had conceived, enclosing a mansion, leopard, wild boar, wild bear's sight cannot look into the courtyard. That will not stimulate them to send out attacks. Surrounded by high rock walls, the shortest place was 30 meters in height. Any animal that didn't have wings wouldn't be able to come in from the surrounding area to harass us. The small waterfall was only 10 meters high, and just in case, I made a few extra stick K panels to block it, which didn't affect the stream or the trout tilting down, but other animals couldn't burrow over it. The most critical area was making yard gates, both to get myself out of the yard and for wild animals to break in. In the end, I chose to put a wooden gate where the wooden wall crosses the stream. I hollowed out the rocks in the stream under the door so that it formed a puddle close to 2 meters deep, and when people went out, they could put up a stick board and step on it without getting wet, and when they came in, they could then use the stick board placed outside. The animals on the island do not have this kind of intelligence, so defense against wild animals is possible. Next, paving the yard. After Miyu puts the kids to bed, she can also join Sarit Po and the two of them and come out to help me move the rocks. The women carried the smaller rocks, leaving the larger ones for me, and the bigger ones I use leverage to get a stick sled. After 2 more busy days, it now feels like a small civilian home when you step outside the cave. Even if the wild beasts appeared nearby and heard our voices or smelled our scent, since they couldn't see our appearance, they might think of us as some kind of plant or a more ferocious animal, and wouldn't dare to rashly get beastly and attack the wooden wall. With a strong fortification, Po and Sarit can chase and play in the yard, and if it's a nice moonlit night, they can come out alone to bathe and count the stars, etc. Since Miyu has recovered, she feels that she has been taken care of too much by the others, so she has taken up the job of cooking every day on the side, plus the fact that her baked food is really better than the others. Whenever the 2 girls and I complimented Miyu on her good cooking, she always smiled and mic'd up her eyes in a flirtatious, sophisticated manner that was very tempting to men. The cage, made a few days ago to catch leopard cats, was still standing empty at the top of the rock, displaying my self-righteousness, so I climbed up to get it back and use it to snap trout later. Miyu told me about her idea of organizing a celebration ceremony for the recently completed mansion, and Sarit and Po clapped their hands when they heard about it. It was up to the 3 women to decide what the event would be. In the evening, the fire in the cave was filled with lots of dry wood, and it had the atmosphere of a bonfire, similar to the one I had at the mercenary camp, where a used tire was doused with oil and thrown into an empty gasoline barrel and lit on fire, and the soldiers began to howl and laugh and make a lot of noise. Miyu is a woman who knows a lot about art. She picks a lot of huge banana leaves in the yard outside the cave and makes them into simple kimonos and fans and performs a Japanese dance. She is a very beautiful woman. 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 Her dance was beautiful and delightful, Sarit and Po could not help themselves and went over to dance with her. I sat by the fire and smiled at the performance of the three beautiful women. Miyu twirled and danced provocatively, watching me, and slowly approached and surrounded me in a graceful and seductive gesture of a woman asking for favor from a man. My fatigue of the past few days had suddenly subsided quite a bit. At night, Po fell asleep in my arms, and Sarit had sweet dreams. In the middle of the night, Miyu woke me up and asked me to accompany her for a walk in the yard. She was now a healthy and beautiful woman, and I knew that if I asked her for pleasure, she would not refuse. Chapter 33. The girl who hasn't been around. Miyu is holding my hand, her face beaming with a charming smile, a nest of autumn water swaying in her bright eyes. Most of our conversations are still based on knowing each other. She took me to the boulder where she once bathed and asked me to sit down with her. Our feet dipped in the cool stream. She rested her head on my shoulder, her dark cloud-like hair falling over my shoulder, radiating infinite tenderness. From the time she encountered the villains all over the body to now, and returned to a beautiful woman's style. She stroked one hand on my chest and looked at the stars in the night sky, falling into infinite reverie, like she was missing her hometown or remembering the beautiful romance she once had. Now the situation, everyone cannot go back to the past. In practical terms, Miyu has been counted as my woman. Perhaps she also expected this destiny, such as the unfinished chances of the last life. Women always give feelings between men and women first before they throw themselves into giving. Miyu's previous flirtation with me was sort of in a position of gratitude and touching. Now, she wanted to formally talk about a relationship with me and surrender her heart and body to me in the future. Just like the woman in the small-town tailor store, truly in love with me, only in any time I need, will her female delicate body to give me, satisfy me, and do not ask for return to melt my heart away. Under the bright moonlight, Miyu is like a little girl, snuggled up next to me, her white, sexy feet kicking and splashing against the stream. This is the rare feminine beauty of a woman, and it would be wrong to disappoint Miyu's 10,000 tender feelings at this moment. I raised my thick, sturdy arms and took her into my arms, feeling her as well as giving her. Perhaps Miyu has a lot of affectionate words to say to me. In the way of verbal communication, she can only use movement and eyes to convey. Her lower body is still more or less residual pain, and such a heart but has been burning love to me. If this moment of hasty sex, to Miyu this married woman, also count as a kind of harm. Japan's forest island. At night, there must be beautiful fireflies, and cherry blossoms fall to the lovers under the moon to add a romantic atmosphere. Feel the peace and beauty of life, so that the young generation hates fascism. Abhor that to the Japanese nationals and people in other countries to bring the tragic times. Although this island has no romantic scenery, it has given infinite blessings to us few outsiders who are lost here, so that in a short period of time, we have the present material basis to survive. Well, deep down, I always wanted to find the shadow of the woman in the tailor store in Miyu, to comfort my thoughts. Perhaps Miyu also imagined me as her husband, filling in the sudden crippling hole in the woman's life. In the long run, we can reproduce more humans on the island. It's just that natural childbirth for the women is too much work and too dangerous, and there's not a thing I, a big, rough man, can do about it if there's an accident during the process. The crocodiles in the big quagmire will always eat all the crocodiles one day, and that island of safety like boulder, after being pushed over by the giant bear, and then using traps to catch the crocodiles, is much more dangerous. I've had thoughts of building a big boat to get off a deserted island. It was just a pipe dream, without the exclusive tools to build it. It was too risky to speculate on the vast ocean with a crude raft, with women and children, looking for a chance to return to human society. The only hope of survival was to be stationed on the island and compete to be the strongest at the top of the food chain. Miyu quietly snuggled in the arms, She used the thumping heartbeat issued by the tender woman, conveying the female message attributed to me. I do not know Miyu's past, the beginning of the mingling at the moment, such as a blank sheet of paper, has long been separated from the earthly, mundane. This flavorful woman suddenly entered my life, as in a dream. In her life, for my intrusion, and another kind of dream. The night is a little deep. Tomorrow do not have to work hard. Labor can recuperate my tired since the island. Stroked Miyu's soft hair. Actually do not know when she slept in my arms. The woman's snuggle eye. Do not know how many men's steel heart of the world melted. Gently picked up the sleeping Miyu. Slowly walked back to the cave. Put her on the soft rubber raft. The baby also pursed his lips to continue to sleep. Never had a father's love in my heart. Po and Sarit were crossing their soft little legs and dreaming sweetly. Now that everything was in order, their tense hearts relaxed, and they realized that they had already been exhausted to the limit. Lying beside the two lovely girls, he drifted off to sleep. The next morning, the three women baked their food, and Po again used that dogwood again, teasing my face and telling me to get up and eat. As soon as I opened my eyes, I just wanted to sit up, but suddenly I felt that my limbs were so sore and weak that I just wanted to go back to sleep. The three of them thought I was sick and eagerly gathered around me, touching my forehead, and Po even put her ear to my chest to listen to my heartbeat, which was really laughable. They were relieved when I told them that I was just tired and that there was nothing wrong with me, and Miyu actually took my pulse, which is an amazing medical skill that originated in China. So, how did she learn it as a Japanese woman? After checking my pulse, she smiled at Po and Sarit and told them not to worry about me, and their nervousness was relieved. They believed that I was just fatigued and that I just needed to rest. We later learned that Miyu is a gynecologist who has studied in many countries and is well-versed in Chinese medicine. This is another thing we are happy. I have been worried about one day we have a headache, suffer from minor illnesses and diseases how to do. Miyu's identity is so coincidental, like God deliberately test us, turning the wheel of fate, will be a few of us dumped into this primitive and mysterious deserted island, in the heart of the arrangement of an auxiliary survival of the woman. On that huge bearskin I lay for 3 days before I regained my normal strength. The three women were always by my side, feeding and watering me with care. As soon as I stepped out of the cave, I felt like a fox awakening from hibernation and was unusually sensitive. Po, seeing that I was getting better, began to pester me to go trout catching with her, and it was only then that I remembered that the empty pit tank, which had not yet been stocked with fresh food, was not yet ready. Found the 2 wooden cages and took Po out of the yard and barricaded the door outside again. We both went as far downstream as we could in order to catch as many trout as possible. This time out, I was much more secure in the knowledge that we had a sturdy defense and that we were slowly adjusting to the island environment. It's not as easy to get nervous when we run into the odd animal and plant again. When I came to the patch of hydrilla where I used to catch trout, many of the trout that had been pounded down from the upper reaches of the creek were hiding and huddled under the thick hydrilla due to the rise in the creek. The 2 narrow sections of the creek where the trout had been blocked last time were so flooded by the rising rain that they could not be seen in position. Po blinked at me with wide eyes and asked me to come up with an idea. I asked her, if you come up with a good way to catch trout, I'll carry you on my back on the way back. Po immediately smiles and claps her hands when she hears that I'm going to carry her, but doesn't think about whether she has a good idea or not. If I can't think of one, you can think of one for me, and it's a win for me. Po grinned at me like, bratty, willful little girl. If I come up with a good idea, you sleep with me immediately, right here? I replied to her with a stern face. No, you're teasing me again, she said, full of concern, but her eyes were fixed on the water plants and her mind was spinning, eager to come up with a way to catch fish. Before I did. This time it's for real. Miyu is a gynecologist and can deliver babies. I'm going to get you pregnant right now, give me babies, and hold them every day, just like Miyu. I said in a serious manner, still with a stern face. I won't, Sarit will. Don't you get her pregnant every night? She got serious too. I was stunned, swinging back to a fragment of memory from the first time Poe went to my loft when I mistakenly thought she didn't know her mother had slept with me, and now this similar mistaken belief was wearing thin again in front of this little girl. Ghostly girl. After saying that, I went over to pounce on her and grabbed her. She didn't have the sense to run away. Her eyes were still staring at the thick water plants floating on the stream. Thinking of ways to catch fish, grabbed her slender arm. A hand will pull her into the embrace. She did not have any surprised expression, like every night into my arms to sleep like Frank. Poe's small mouth pout, hands gently pushed. Want to break free from my embrace, petulant said. You even tease me, not to be fooled. This girl last time alone with me out, apprehensive. Now, there is not a little bit of the original appearance, teasing not fun. Let go of her and said, ghost. Essence. She sweetly sent me a smile and said, I really do not know how to catch trout. You help? Me think, if the solution is very good, I will kiss you, can it? I laughed out loud at her little adult-like words. Giving you a kiss is the same feeling as being kissed by Miyu's baby. I had just finished saying this flirtatious remark to her when she immediately jumped into my arms, hooked her soft arms around my neck, and jumped up in her efforts to get in my face, sipping hard. Same. I was frozen by this. Little girl with a good character. How could I not expect she would come to such a trick? Like playing chess to someone suddenly will live commander-in-chief. A moment of no idea, regret earlier should not play so ethereal. Well, hurry up and catch some fish. I digressed, and Poe didn't press the issue further. The way to catch trout this time is a little more difficult. Poe and I pulled up the trouser legs. First of all, the upstream-downstream stream diversion, slowing down the impact, and then used the mud circle, surrounded by a thick piece of water grass, so that the trout inside the drilling cannot go out due to the circle of the area is too large. It took a while of effort to complete. Poe's handsome face, splattered with a lot of mud sticking to the face of a three-colored cat, comical and cute. There's so much water in the circle, and the trout are hiding under the thick grass, so how can I catch them if I can't see them clearly? Poe was a bit anxious, thinking that the work was over, and thought that I must use a wooden basket to go into the circle to catch the trout. Stupid the way you think you can only catch water plants, not fish. Poe laughed at my remark, and with a row of neat white baby teeth peeping out of her rosy lips and her big pretty eyes flashing with wonder, beholding my next method of catching a fish. Chapter 34, Confusion under the watercress. Judge the puddle surrounded by the circle, in the lowest place of the walk, with a wooden stick to poke open a small openings, outward release of water, in order to prevent the trout to take advantage of the current to swim away, and a wooden cage blocked in the drainage to play the role of filtering. Poe then see to understand the method of catching fish, excitedly said, good way, when the circle of water to drain, without the use of wooden baskets to buckle and directly pick up the fish will be able to do so. The water was not draining too fast, so I poked a second hole in the side, and I asked Poe to pass me the wooden basket to block the drain. Poe happily jumped into the puddle, poking here and there with a small wooden stick, only to see the trout, who thought they were hiding under the thick grass, immediately panicked and shrugged, scurrying from side to hide. Poe was so happy to see so many trout under the water that he couldn't stop giggling. Don't just giggle, join me in rinsing out the water, said I also into the puddle, 2 palms together, wow wow wow, to the outside of the circle ruffled up. Poe feel funny, hurriedly came to my side, imitating the action, excited like outside ruffled splash. There are wooden pots, how good, atop so dozens of times, she said excitedly as she ruffled the water. If the wooden basin was as big as the puddle, you could rinse the water dry at once. Lou didn't realize that I was ridiculing her with these words, and while ruffling the water in a lively manner, she replied with a heated smile, I can't hold a basin that big, and neither can you. The best way to do it is to use the pump that irrigates the paddy fields, and we can both sit by the stream and watch it together." Her naivety again made me smile. I went on to tease her. "Well, that makes sense, and let Poe be in charge of generating the electricity when the time comes." "You're laughing at me again." Poe scolded me. The direction of the small, skillful hands lifting the water suddenly changed, and the cool stream water swished and hit my back. "If you dare splash me again, I'll really put you to sleep." Before I could finish my words, several more streams were splashed onto my face. "No sleep for you, no?" Poe said with a good-natured snarl as she teased and splashed more stream water over me. I had some trouble keeping my eyes open, and her playfulness rose even more when she saw that I was starting to get in trouble. "Ruffling the water on me is tantamount to a waste of effort. Save your strength to splash it outwards," I persuaded her, shaking her wet hair. The water droplets suddenly scattered in all directions, hitting Poe's pretty face. She pouted again and said unhappily, "Shake it outward, or you'll be working for nothing." She giggled. "Be happy. Look at you. Save your strength for catching trout later." Although he was joking with Poe, his hands kept on splashing outward to speed up the progress of puddle drying as much as possible. The long, thick green grasses that floated on the surface of the water a moment ago were both fresh and beautiful to look at. At this moment, the surface of the water dropped by half, and those water plants were like freshly processed noodles from a noodle-making machine, following the trend of the water flow, softly sticking to the starting point and sticking down. Below the trout, large groups covered with water plants, sensing the decline in the water level, which cannot stand, shaking tail and swimming. That stupidity again manifested itself. This group of trout swimming on the surface of the water, or the same old silly look, shaking the fat body, two eyes glaring, the mouth arched out of the water, while breathing and swallowing the floating grass clippings. As soon as Poe and I got close to them, the trout swished and churned out countless swirls of water and disappeared into the bottom of the dense water plants. 5 days of rain had added to their capitalization, and one by one, they were so agile that they looked quite impressive. The trout, with their small, simple brains, destined to be the tragedy of this island's hungry bellies, play hide and seek, hiding their stupidity, mistakenly believing that if they don't see me and Poe, we shouldn't see them. The water level dropped quite a bit more, and some of the ones that thought they could hide from the world by hiding under the water plants and not swimming away to follow the water level wobble were now all wrapped up under the thick water plants and desperately flopping around. "What the hell were you doing earlier, big dumb fish, heh?" Poe, seeing that there were a lot of trout bound under the hydrilla, was actually happy to laugh at the trout who didn't even know the language. "Well, let the rest of the water tilt itself and now begin to catch fish." Hearing that he could catch fish, Poe's joy was even greater. Running to the center of the watergrass, using a stick to pick apart a thick piece of watergrass, a few green and black scaled trout immediately hooked and rolled. Translucent tail vigorously slapped on the water grass that could not be floated, wanting to swim in. The water as well cannot be done, can only be sifted like a pea, crackling up the body, jumping and flopping around, wanting to turn into amphibious frogs. Several trout zoomed in their frightened eyes and opened their mouths to breathe heavily, like children suddenly discovered during hide-seek, or like a person suffering from a heart attack. Poe saw these guys, so scared and woeful, happy to squat down to catch, just grabbed the hand. The fat trout tail vigorously flung, "Zee," a slippery sound, extrusion of her white small hand, scared Poe a moment, but I am amused. Coward. This girl, however, did not argue with me and went back to catching the trout that had escaped from her hands, trying to prove that she was not too bold with another attempt. When a trout is in the water, It secretes a layer of oily mucus on its body surface, which protects its scales and makes it less likely to be snagged or pinched by objects. So Po just grabbed it, and the trout twisted hard and slipped out of her tiny hands again. Don't scratch it, it's going to die from your fall, and it won't be able to go back to live in captivity. Only then did she put away the happy energy she had just felt, shook her head helplessly, sighed, and said, I didn't dare to grab it hard for fear of hurting it. Hearing her defend herself, I also followed her example, shook my head, sighed, and said, Hey, I don't dare to grab it hard for fear of hurting it. Now Po was not happy. The little mouth pouted again, pouting, said, You to catch. I turn over the water grass, see who is fast. The water in the puddle was almost leaking out, so I plugged up an opening, pulled a few handfuls of thick water plants, and laid them on the bottom of the wooden baskets, which were used to hold fresh trout. My rough palms, and much larger than Poe's small hands, easily grabbed the trout caged in the slender watercress and carefully placed them in the wooden basket. Poe picked back and forth with a small stick, looking for any trout hiding underneath, just trying to find another nest before I finished picking up the trout I found. Ha ha ha, here. She excitedly called me over to catch every few she found, and would have laughed even harder if she'd seen the trout slip out of my hand. It turns out that the trout that wash downstream after the island rains and the water level rises will collectively trace their way back to the river in the next few days. The wooden basket was full of trout when it was getting late. I tied it up with sisal and carried the heavy basket and the trout in the cage back to the cave. Poe had a great time today, running ahead of me, jumping left and right on the road, picking a large handful of colorful flowers, clutching them in her hand and gesticulating them to me. That innocent young girl's playfulness, reflecting in the dim red sunset, especially serene and beautiful. After arriving at the mouth of the cave, I poured 2 baskets of trout into the pit. This group of black-headed guys spit out the white foam immediately floated all over the water. In the evening, I barbecued 3 big and tender trout. They have been eating jerky for 7 or 8 days. Now they can eat freshwater trout for a change. They were happy to talk and laugh. Poe gave Sarit and Miu small flowers picked on the way. The 3 women stuck each other's heads, smiling like a beautiful woman in a painting. The air is humid these days. At night, I used the leftover small pieces of python skin, wiped the disassembled guns to prevent the weapons from rusting. Miu came up to me and said that when I went to the island, I saw a lot of precious herbs growing on the road, and I wanted to go pick some back and keep them as a spare. The 3 women all know that no one can go out alone without me. I promised to accompany Miu tomorrow. She was very happy. Stifled in the caves and yard, it is indeed a bit boring. Take the opportunity to pick herbs, go out and have a walk. It's also a good thing. The next day, Miu left the children in the care of Poe and Sarit, and when I left them both with 2 pistols. Out of the yard, taking Miu's hand, I walked back in the direction from which I had come from the island of Ding, looking for the herbs that Miu remembered. This area is a rolling valley, not the woods of the past, and the view can be radiated for a long distance, so the 2 of them walk with ease. Miu wraps her arms around me and rests her head on my shoulder, just as she does when she walks her husband on the streets of Tokyo, and pedestrians can tell at a glance that these are a pair of lovers. The 2 of them are in the middle of the street, but they are not in the middle of the street. After walking downhill for an hour, I came to the short irrigation belt with red and yellow flowers, which I had passed before. Stopping to admire the beautiful scenery of the island, Miu, whoosh, jumped into my arms and hugged me tightly. The sea breeze blew, lifting her charming long hair. Rubbing on my cheeks, I also embraced Miu. After a while, let go of Miu in her arms. She took my hand and continued to walk towards the bushes. There were many plants that I hadn't noticed before. Miu Pink head off a cluster of green grass with small white flowers and told me that it could be boiled down to make a tonic for colds and wind, and pinched off some yellow flowers with pink spots and said that it was a poultice for wounds that could be chewed and applied. Throughout the day, It was as if the two of us were not out picking herbs, but more like lovers, strolling through flowers, looking here, touching there, lovingly. I picked a small orange-red delicate flower and put it on Miyu's hair. She looked more and more charming and charming, taking in a man's heart. Under Miyu's guidance, I began to gain a new understanding of many herbs, and the wooden basket I brought with me was filled with herbs collected by Miyu. Whenever I look towards the sea, countless thoughts well up in my heart, and Miyu should feel the same way as I do. No one is a man or woman who hastily moves on, and the love that sprang up between her and me in a short time was like herbs in a basket, healing the pain of losing a lover in each other's hearts. Chapter 35. A ship that shoots guns on a rainy night. Miyu wanted to watch the sunset with me at the beach before going back, but I didn't agree, even though the area was a gentle valley, and the road back in the dark was much less dangerous than the woods leading to the big slough. I was still worried about getting into trouble. Poe and Sarit stayed alone in the cave, and I was worried about them, too, getting out of the yard to play in a moment of carelessness. Today's harvest is not small. Brought back a basket full of herbs. Miyu in the future, in addition to babysitting, but also can brew medicine. She is very interested in this. That can pass the time of boredom, but also for life is very meaningful. There is no winter on the island, mostly subtropical climate. Only in the rainy days, the temperature is slightly cold. Good place to live. The stream flows through the cave. Cool fresh water not only quenches the thirst, but also cools down the temperature, bringing great convenience to life. My heart is still a little unsettled. The food will be finished again in another 10 days or so, and in the next 2 days, we'll have to go to the big slough, once again hunting crocodiles. Wilderness survival is the most taboo free time. Cannot think of what to do, such as the realization of the shortage of a thing. ND? Then prepare to be too late, and even threaten the sustainability of life. Every day when the sun is at its hottest, Miyu picks the picked herbs, chops them up and hangs them to dry. Sarit and I continued to go to the grove to cut wood. It was still their job to pick up the dry wood and carry it back to the cave to dry. I have a large stockpile of wood and plan to make some more tools. For example, in the puddle under the gate of the yard, I installed a large wooden cage under the water, similar to the design used to catch leopard cats. If a wild bear or leopard tries to dive through the wooden wall and drill forward, once it touches the mechanism, a board of sticks will immediately fall vertically behind its buttocks, trapping it and drowning it alive. When I woke up in the morning, like a hunter, I would poke the wooden cage under the water with a stick to see if there was a dead animal. If there was, it would be food delivered to the door without any risk. It would be a waste to wait for the carcass of the beast to soak in the water and become a stinking corpse if I didn't check the wooden cage carefully. The day of the crocodile hunt was approaching, and I had already chipped out a lot of wooden thorns. I even asked Miyu if there were any anesthetic plants that could be applied to the thorns to put the crocodiles into a comatose state after penetrating their stomachs, so that we would not have to go through all the trouble and risk of poking out the crocodile's eyes. I have been worried that those leopard cats will come back to harass, or there are flexible wild leopard, with its sharp hooked claws, pickpocket wooden wall tumbling down. For security reasons, I also in the wooden wall roots on the inside, about 8 meters wide range, inserted a row of dense traps, sticks of different thicknesses, the tip of the thorns vertically upward, regardless of the big leopard's small leopard cat. As long as jumped off the wooden wall, the stomach hit the thorns of the tip of the head, and immediately intestines outflow, a life. The trout in the pit ponds, perhaps overstocked in captivity, were surfacing 1 or 2 times a day, in a half-dead state, just in time for the women to eat the easily digestible trout while I ate the bear meat myself. Perhaps the rainy season is approaching, and a lot of overcast clouds are piling up, where the sea meets the sky, which worries me a little. There are many wild animals on the island that don't often come out when it rains, but most of them don't stock up on food, and when they're hungry, they'll still come out in the rain to forage for food. and the aggressiveness of a hungry animal will be several times greater than usual. I was always on the lookout for this possibility, and at noon I would go out in the rain to check the sturdiness of the wooden walls and to see if the traps set were loose. The thin rain, flung down from the sky, smashed into the stream, and the whole stream was like a boiling boil, bubbling with countless bubbles. I shook the gate of the courtyard and poked at the water cages below, and was very satisfied to find that they were all quite sturdy. When I checked the wooden thorns fixed under the wooden wall, I suddenly heard an ear-splitting rumble explosion and hastily crouched down for fear of being struck by lightning. But curls of smoke like drifting rain from the air intensively twisted down. Another my blurred vision, delayed to see, cut through the lightning in the sky. Do not feel a heartbeat of shock. Anticipate several possibilities. The rocks on the island, blazing with irradiation on a sunny day, are weathered and chipped away by sharp rains, and with more destructive force would be a landslide. Although it is unlikely that the island would sink, there is also the most feared possibility, the sound of artillery, someone firing at the island. Paralysis and overconfidence are both triggers for death in such circumstances, and I rushed back to the cave, grabbed my sniper rifle, which I had just polished the night before, tugged at the thick hemp vines that overhang the wooden door at the entrance of the cave, and stomped up the slippery rock wall to climb to the top to survey and test my anticipation of which was closest to being possible. Just stood on the roof of the cave. I saw in the distance near the sea an island, unfamiliar island, standing in the misty rain. Suddenly suspicious, immediately opened the sniper lens and then carefully peeped. The rain made the lens very flowery. Although it is impossible to aim, the efficacy of farsightedness is still possible. From the fuzzy outline in the mirror image, can confirm clearly, that is, not the sudden rise of the island, is a large ship. I could have grabbed the women in the cave, run over to them, called for help, and left the island, as if it were a prison cell. But now, it is not clear why the ship fired at the island, not to mention what kind of people on board. Many factors cannot be judged. If you really want to be sloppy and careless, and then get on a sailor ship similar to Barsati, or as the Sea Devil ship of thieves, it is not a self-inflicted trap. It was fortunate that the ship was firing at the island in the rain. If it had approached quietly in the daytime, it would have been able to observe the smoke rising from the mouth of the cave while we were cooking, and such unconscious self-exposure might well have given rise to danger. If the rain had continued in this manner, I could never have ascertained whether the ship was dangerous or not. If the big ship was a regular warship of some country, performing military maneuvers, and I failed to learn about it in time, and missed the opportunity to leave the deserted island, I would have deplored it for the rest of my life, and I would have let the woman and the child to live a life of a savage. Back at the cave, I recounted what I had seen, and the girls were both happy and panicked. I told them to barbecue out tomorrow's food now, and to keep the fire burning only at dawn, not as usual, and that the big ship, if it hadn't left, would easily notice the smoke rising from the island. They began to do as I told them, excitement on their faces, expecting it to be a ship that would take everyone off the island. Taking out 2 long, thick, well-compiled hemp vines, and taking my dagger and pistol with me, I went out of the cave. I had to get close enough to the big ship to see what was going on through the darkness of the night and the noise of the thunderstorm. If it was not a pirate ship, I would come back and take them with me and leave the island forever. In case I am unfortunate enough to encounter a pirate ship, I will also be prepared and find out their motives. The light was already blurred, and if I wanted to get to the sea, and if I had to pass through the woods again on a rainy night, my eyes would be like dropping into a tank of ink, and I would only be able to see in front of me for a moment of lightning, and would barely be able to walk for 2 paces, and my sight would be even darker afterward, and it would be very hard to do so. I climbed up to the roof of the cave again with great effort. This is the escape route I have long thought of, if one day there are wild leopards and wild bears like leopard cats attacked in groups. arching down the wooden wall, rely on the wooden door of the cave cowering and resisting, is bound to be a dead end. I also plan to teach the women how to use the hemp vine to climb to the top of the cave in a few days, but as luck would have it, it seems to be useless. I firmly bolted a hemp vine to the largest tree on the roof of the cave and threw the other end into the bottom of the valley facing the sea, and on top of the hemp vine, every meter, there was a knot I tied, and in the middle of the knot was inserted a 20-centimeter wooden stick, originally intended and shoulder winding this hemp vine, combined together, made into a rope ladder, so that the women in the climb much swifter. However, it was too late to make a rope ladder to make it convenient and safe for me to climb down this almost vertical 50-meter high mountain wall. I wanted to tie two hemp vines together so that the safety factor is larger, but later near the big ship, I still have to use the hemp vines to climb up to the deck. So I had to take a risk and follow a long, thick hemp vine, stepping on the knot, climbing down little by little. The hemp rattan was soaked in a lot of rainwater, and it was much more slippery than usual and also easy to break. When I was at the top of the valley, I tied a few more dead knots in the trees, hoping that I would continue to be blessed and reach the ground safely. When returning, if there is no special reason, I will go to the woods and circle back to the cave. The road is farther away. The certainty of my life, at least, is much greater than climbing down the hemp vine to the top of the valley. I tried to slowly grip the rattan rope so that my body's center of gravity was vertically attached to it, not like the firefighters on Bangkok TV or the armed police fighters who were beautifully postured and bouncing with their feet in stirrups, sliding and jumping down like frogs hanging from the walls of a tall building. Such movements, in the training base of my mercenary battalion, are the most basic and simple, nice to look at but not practical. The rain, with its sea breeze, was chaotically lapping at the rock face, and the surface had become very slippery. Lightning interspersed with thunder from ahead illuminated the rainy night for a moment, and I felt like I was sliding sideways down the spine of a mud skipper as huge as a mountain range, tugging on a rope. At this moment, if I use a flamboyant bouncing maneuver, it is easy to step in the air so that my face and chest hit the rock wall heavily, producing vertigo, and when my limbs are flaccid, I will fall to the bottom of the valley and die. Before I slid down, I put on white python skin gloves on my hands, and I wanted to make a short skirt for Miyu, but she was so jealous of the color of the python skin that she refused to wear it, preferring to show it to me with her naked lower body. In order not to waste resources, I disassembled the python skin skirt and made 3 pairs of gloves, which I distributed to the women to put on when doing things like carrying stones and picking herbs in order to prevent their tender hands from being scratched. Instead, I now wore it and put it to good use. With my feet together and my body straight, I clutched the rope with both hands and slid down vertically without any extra movement. It was a standard helicopter landing, and the speed of the descent was controlled by the strength of my hands and feet as they clenched the rope. In the daytime, I had carefully observed the plane of the rock face, and I didn't see any abrupt wall edges or plants. By relying on the memory in my head, I regulated the speed of my descent, and when I arrived at the rough surface of the rock, I slowed down the speed to prevent my body from being scratched. Although the rain was cool, my hands and feet were still burning from the friction reaction. The moment my feet hit the ground, I crouched down and rolled forward, unloading the downward force of my body weight and protecting my ankles and hip bones from shock. If it had been a clear day, the lookouts on that ship would have easily spotted me, and if it had been an enemy warship, the snipers on board would have easily shot through the hemp vines when I was halfway up, watching me fall to my death, after which the ship would have been full of soldiers cheering and the killers smug. So this was the perfect moment to approach the ship quietly. The rain was still crackling on my shoulders and face, and still in my vision, I could only vaguely see the ship at sea, blurred like a floating island,